Hello, my name is Des and I am the owner and operator of Haunted Traverse Tour Company. Today, Traverse City is 125 years young and I am doing my third episode of my virtual historical tour of Traverse City. In honor of Traverse City's big day, I wanted to look back at some intricate players that are a big part of why we get to enjoy an historically rich, beautiful, and vibrant Traverse City, Michigan by presenting Episode 3, Founding Fathers. But first, let's start with water. Lots of water, a sea actually that covered northwest and northern Michigan. A vibrant ecosystem of life could be found below the waves, including whales, fish, and even Hexagonaria percarinata sloths. I didn't get that right. Today, we just call this type of coral that is now fossified Podolsky stones. Then came the ice. Lots of ice. 25,000 years ago, the last of the great glaciers carved out what we know as modern-day Michigan, and it receded from the area, leaving behind its marks in the beautiful Great Lakes of Michigan, the hills, the rivers, and the interior lakes, all due to those beautiful glaciers that came visiting. But Mother Nature wasn't done letting the water form our region. 8,000 years ago, the beautiful bay was again rising up, and the land that was Grand Traverse was underneath this deluge of high-quality H2O. Picture Mission Peninsula as nothing but an island. Paleo-Indians reached Michigan around 10,000 years ago and got up to all sorts of interesting activities, such as creating hedges, like that one that we know of over in England. It's not very famous, is it? I believe that's called Stonehenge. And the remains of the beasts that they hunted, including the mighty mastodon. Other tribes would follow, leaving their own mark on Michigan history, but if I've whetted your curiosity on the strange and unique history of this ancient land, come check out my Weird 101 tour. A tour that delves into the strange and unusual that only this mysterious land could unfold from the great depths of the Grand Traverse Bay. White settlers from European countries would follow, like the French and English fur traders, coureurs de bois, runners of the woods, and explorers alike. Signs of their trek into this region are noted in long-forgotten rough cabins and the charted maps of note to guide those that would follow. Some say that another culture came here from Europe long before the white settlers. I dive into this fascinating subject more in my Weird 101 tour, if you're interested. So for now, let's get to those 1800s. Yay! France and that guy called Napoleon owned territory from Louisiana all the way up to Colorado. The war was unfolding in 1812 between England and the young United States of America. And frontier men were making their way to the newly formed state of Michigan in 1837 to use their great axes. A tall Paul Bunyan and blue oxen would be one subject of lore during this time, and the lumbermen came in droves to hack out some semblance of a town from the virgin white pine forests that were 200 feet high and as far as the eye could see. Then came 1847 and an Illinois farmer by the name of Captain Harry Boardman and his son Horace, who built the first sawmill on the 200 acres we know as Traverse City. However, the northern wilderness proved too much of a challenge for the family. In 1950, Captain Boardman personally hosted Perry Hanna to negotiate a sale of the property. Does anyone have $4,500 I can borrow? A nice price to purchase 200 acres of land in Traverse City. Nowadays, I think that buys you rent for 2 months up here. Perry would recount his experience of entering the bay in a journal. He noted, "We rounded Old Mission Harbor just as the sun was going down behind the tops of the tall maples that stood on the ridge in the center of the peninsula. It was one of those serene and beautiful evenings with a southerly breeze not more than a half a mile per hour. As we entered the harbor, on the banks of the western side sat perhaps 40 or 50 old Indian hunters." I find it amusing that the schooner by the name of the Venus, which Perry Hanna arrived on, got stuck on its way into the bay, and must have provided great amusement to the Native Americans on the shoreline. Oh, the heckling that probably ensued. Perry Hanna and his partners Albert, Tracy Lay, and James Morgan in History's Eyes would prove up to the task of wrangling the wilds of this area, and Traverse City's history would never be the same without them. So let's begin by telling you that these gentlemen were made of the sturdy stuff, and quickly set to work to right the wrong start by the Boardmans in 1851. First thing first was to place a sawmill in the right spot, right on West Grand Traverse Bay, where the current open space and Clinch Park is located. A steam-powered mill, fueled by the scraps of the wood harvested, was built in 1852 and refined into an efficient machine to lay bare the great pine forest that stood tall on this part of the land. Perhaps too efficient were the men and the machinery. In the 1800s, we would kill off 4 species of fish in the Boardman, and the Boardman River's ecosystem would severely be diminished by the pollution such industry created. 400 million feet of lumber would be shipped from the lumberyard on the bay, mostly to Chicago, to help rebuild from the Great Fire that burned down 3.3 square miles of the city in 1871. Big thanks, I'm sure, were owed by the Hannah Lay Company to Mrs. O'Leary and her cow for kicking over that lantern and creating the demand that made the Hannah Lay Lumber Company, which was conveniently located just south of where the fire's devastation occurred, very wealthy men. Fact: lumber made men millionaires, and then made them broke. But not our Mr. Perry Hannah. He saw the end, or perhaps heard it. Axes were falling more quiet in the area. There are only so many 200-foot tall pines to cut down, and trees don't shoot up again overnight. So with the savvy forethought, Hannah sold his share to J.J. Fay Jr. and Company in 1887 and set his sights on making the place he named truly live up to his legacy. Albert Lay was not fueled by the love of this area, and although he too would make his mark on Traverse City, it seems to me, dear viewer, that Albert was industrious, and that made him focused on creating efficiencies in Traverse City to help it to be prosperous and therefore grow his own finances as well. He would help create the post office, lay out the village, and oversee placing into being the necessary judicial systems, as well as overseeing the lumber mill during his 6-month shift up here in Traverse City. But I don't think his heart was here in TC. Perry and Albert had a standing agreement that each would take turns living and overseeing their Traverse City operations and then switch their attention for the remainder of the year to their operation in Chicago. So that's where I was referring to the 6 months on and 6 months off shift. Hannah didn't carry Albert's pragmatic view of how to squeeze value from the area. Perry, at some point, perhaps the first moment he stepped foot here, seemed to have lost his heart to Traverse City. And so in 1855, Perry would remain full-time up here in Traverse City, and Albert would resign himself, for health reasons, supposedly, to remaining permanently in Chicago. In 1881, Traverse City would be a village, but Perry wanted the name to reflect truly a large, thriving enterprise of the North, and would push to bring other industry into the area to create that thriving economy. The Hannah Lay Mercantile Store started its humble origins as a wooden structure located near the sawmill on Bay and Union Street, which would in turn into the largest store structure in all of northern Michigan. In 1883, this huge spanning structure on Front Street was made from 1.8 million white bricks produced at the local brickyard in Graylickville. The store was truly a place where it dealt with everything. From clothing to carriages, one need look no further than the big store, fueled by steam generators, freight elevators, even its own sewage system, and electricity to serve their clients' material needs. Sadly, the store would close in 1928, 14 years after the passing of Perry Hannah. It would remain a store, including at one time hosting Montgomery Ward from 1937 to 1981. Tragically, the eastern half of the building would be devastated by a fire on April 19, 1940. Here are some of the images of the firefighters fighting to save what today proudly displays the green and gold historical marker, signifying the true historical significance of this building to the state of Michigan. Today, the big store is half what it was once, but the legacy of the store still echoes through time. Perry Hannah started the store when the population of the village was only 1,897 residents, but the population would grow up to 9,407 by the early 1900s, helping to earn Traverse City its city status on May 18, 1895. And so, Traverse City is 125 years old as I speak. In 1869, Perry Hannah would go on to create other industries in the area, such as the Hannah Lay Grist Mill, located in Slab City, later to be known as Baghdad. The Slab City moniker most likely came from the fact that Bohemian immigrants working the sawmill would bring home slabs of wood with no use in the industry to construct their homes. A perfect example of this would be the oldest continually operating restaurant in Michigan. It's called Sledder's. It's located west of downtown Traverse City. Another industry that would help in growing Traverse City would be to establish railroads to roll their steel horses into town. The first railroad established by none other than our Mr. Perry Hannah would be called the Grand Rapids and Indiana in 1872, followed shortly by the M&NE, known as the Manistee and Northeast Railroad. The depot would be located on the corner of Union and Grandview Parkway in present times for the M&E. With such industry, Traverse City was able to secure and provide materials to the industrial engine, gaining momentum in a growing United States. Perry Hanna's industrious nature, fueled with a reserved but passionate love for Traverse City, his service in the state legislature to push Traverse City's causes, personally overseeing the establishment of the Northern Michigan Asylum, and eventually would earn him the well-deserved title of the grandfather of Traverse City. The Hanna Park, located a stone's throw from a 6th Street Victorian mansion, would be established in 1887. In 2014, a bronze statue, 6 feet tall, standing sentinel in the park, can be seen driving from downtown Traverse City, just south on Union Street. Perry Hanna would pass on August 16, 1904. He had predicted prior to his death that Traverse City's population would continue to boom, to become a city that he believed would be one of the most beautiful towns in all of the state of Michigan. And that man was never wrong. As for Albert Lay, who I argue was just as intricate in establishing the groundwork for the Traverse City of today, he did, after all, actually name Traverse City when submitting his postal route application. We came very close to being named Grand Traverse City, but recommendations to hiatus the word Grand left us with the convenient working title for the city as Traverse City. And although it is believed that it was an illness that had him departing Traverse City, the more I dive into the life of Albert Tracy Lay, the more I find his departure was more likely attributed to his upper-class rearing and the loss of more modern civility that Traverse City could afford in the mid-1800s versus those big cities like Chicago. Schooled in a private setting and raised by a legislator father in the United States House of Representatives, Lay seemed better equipped for the more than working-class Hanna to negotiate some of the business dealings in Chicago. And so, the partnership between the two evolved to play into each other's partners' strengths, which conveniently covered each other's working weaknesses. Albert T. Lay Park, in the heart of what was known as Slabtown, could be seen opposite of Perry Hanna's statue on Union Street as a monument to a man intricate in the founding of Traverse City, but I can't help but wonder if a statue is not warranted for our Mr. Albert Tracy Lay as well. Lay would pass a little more than a decade after Perry Hanna. The company they founded was dissolved in 1931, but one could argue that if not for these two industrious men, the area we know as Traverse City would have been named and landscaped quite differently, and may have been a ghost town like many other lumbering towns from Michigan's past. Thank you for watching Episode 3, Traverse City's Founding Fathers. If you would like to know more about what Haunted Traverse Tour Company is up to these days, please follow us on our social media sites or subscribe on our website. I dove into the history of our founding fathers, but if you are interested in topics that will have a chill running down your spine, may I suggest my historical ghost lantern tour? Or if you're looking for something strange and unusual, my Weird 101 tour. It embraces all those paranormal, strange, and weird happenings unfolding right here in Traverse City. So, my dear guests, until episode 4, I'm Desiree, saying goodbye for now.